back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, live inside the Beltway on this Thursday, August the 26th, 2021. I'm now pleased to welcome back to the program former President Donald Trump. Mr. President, welcome back. It's good to talk to you again.
Good morning.
This is the 22nd time we've had an interview on the record. We've talked about 8 times off the record. I appreciate it every time, but I especially appreciate it in the middle of this fiasco abroad. I've got 50 questions, which would be 5 times as many as President Biden has answered since this crisis began. What do you make about his availability to the press, Mr. President?
Well, he can't be available because I don't think he knows what's happening, and it's frankly a horrible thing that's going on. I think it's the most embarrassing moment for our military and for our country. I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen it. It just doesn't make sense. How they're doing it, what they're doing. We had it in perfect shape, just like we had the southern border in perfect shape, and then he destroyed it. We had the fewest number of people coming in. Now we have the most number of people and drugs and other things coming in. We had that in the best shape in the history of our country. And now, for this long period of this war, this horrible 21-year war, we had it in such good shape to get out and get out with pride, get out with really a moral victory. And for some reason, it doesn't make sense, he pulled the military out first.
It made no sense.
The whole thing went kaput.
Yeah. My first question is a little bit long, Mr. President, but bear with me. Your former Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, said on this show last Friday that the agreement you directed him to sign with the Taliban was, quote, conditions-based, and your former National Security Advisor, Robert O'Brien, was my guest on Monday, and he said very emphatically that you would never have stood for any of 3 things. 1, you wouldn't have presided over a Saigon-style retreat in Afghanistan. 2, no Americans would have been left behind. You would have never evacuated the military before American civilians. And number 3, you never have left billions and billions of dollars of high-tech equipment behind. Were Secretary Pompeo and Ambassador O'Brien right about what they told me about you?
Well, you left out one thing. We would not have stood for any soldiers or any Americans being killed or shot at or hurt in any way. That was in there. And for 18 months, not one American soldier was killed. Not one. 18 months. And that was because of the agreement and because of my talk with Abdul, who is now the boss, as you know. He is now the boss. I wasn't sure he was the boss, but now I look at television just like you do and radio, and I see he's the boss. That's the man I was dealing with. And I had a very, very tough conversation with him about what we're going to do to them if anything happens. But you really have to add to your 3 points, also add the fact that nobody was to be killed, harmed in any way, and nobody was. It was an amazing thing. We had a very strong agreement. It was conditions-based. Now, there were many other parts of the agreement also, and if they violated them, you know that, we went in and bombed the hell out of them, and they never would. They never would have come into Kabul, and they just wouldn't do it. Now, what happened is one day Biden said, take the soldiers out, and it went back to the leaders of the Taliban, to the whole group of them, that the soldiers are leaving. And I would say that they were shocked, okay? I am surmising that they were shocked because we had that thing so tight. And don't forget, I brought it from 20,000 people down to 2,500 people. But we also had NATO had 5,000 people at our request.
Prior to the
5, which nobody talks about.
No, I want to get to that. The NATO had 5,000, we had 2,500 in air power. But prior to the Doha Agreement, you had authorized the dropping of the mother of all bombs in Afghanistan, the Moab, on an Islamic State complex in April of 2017. You hit Syria after Assad used chemical weapons. You got al-Baghdadi. You got Soleimani after the militia controlled attack the American. Did the Taliban leader, specifically Mullah Abdul Baradar, did they fear you doing to them what you had done to these people?
Well, I don't want to say they feared me, but everybody else said they did. We got al-Baghdadi of ISIS, and he was trying to rebuild ISIS. And when I took over, ISIS was all over the place. It was all over the place. And then I got a certain general who was fantastic. You know, we don't have all bad generals, okay? We have some real bad ones on television. I call them the television generals are terrible, but we have great generals. And I had a certain general that I liked, and we took out ISIS in a very short period of time, wiped them out. And they were gone 100%. Do you remember I wanted to bring them back when we had 99%? And everybody said, no, you didn't do 100%. You got to get 100%, including the fake news media. And when I took it over, the ISIS was all over the place. At 99%, I wanted to get the hell out. And the media said, well, you didn't get 100%. I said, you know what? We're taking another 2 weeks. We're going to get 100%. We got 100%, and they were gone. And they respected us, and they respected me, but they respected us. And don't think that the Taliban wasn't watching, because ISIS is tougher than the Taliban and nastier than the Taliban. And ISIS was watching, and then they didn't exist anymore. And we took out the founder of ISIS, al-Baghdadi, and then, of course, Soleimani. Now, just so you understand, Soleimani is bigger by many, many times than Osama bin Laden. The founder of ISIS is bigger by many, many times, al-Baghdadi, than Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden had one hit, and it was a bad one, in New York City, the World Trade Center. But these other two guys were monsters. They were monsters. And I kept saying for years, why aren't they getting them? For years I said it. I got them. The press doesn't talk about it. They don't talk about it because they don't want to talk about it. You talk about it.
I do.
A little bit.
What did you communicate to Baradar, Mullah Baradar, the Abdul Baradar who you talked to when you spoke to him? What did you tell him?
So I set up a conversation with him, and people said, oh, you shouldn't be talking. Well, I set up a conversation with Kim Jong-un of North Korea. We didn't have a nuclear war. Had I not, then Obama would have been right. We would have had a nuclear war. President Obama said to me, we're going to have a nuclear war with North Korea. I said, have you ever spoken to him? He said, no. I said, don't you think that might be a good idea? But anyway, I know he wanted to speak to him, but he never got to speak to him. And I think the other side didn't want to talk to Obama. So what happened is I spoke to the head of the known head, because it's
Baradar, right? Baradar.
Yeah, but I spoke to and sort of the known head, but nobody was sure. But now I'm sure, and I was sure then when I was speaking to him, and I knew as soon as I spoke to him. And even the introduction, I say, hello, and he screamed something very tough. And I then started with him. I said, listen, before we start the long time conversation and conversations that we're going to have, I have to say one thing, and I'll never have to say it again to you. And here's what I say. If you do anything bad to the United States of America, if you do anything bad to any of our civilians, to any American citizen, or if you do anything out of the normal, you know, they've been fighting for 1,000 years, but out of the normal, because you've had your wars, and if you do anything out of the normal, but anything bad to America or any American citizens, I will hit you harder than anybody has ever been hit in world history. You will be hit harder than any country and any person has ever been hit in world history. And we will start with the exact location and the exact town, and it's right here, and I believe I repeated the name of his town. That will be the first place that we start, and I won't be able to speak to you anymore after that, and isn't that a very sad thing? But that is the story. And then he asked me one question, and I'd rather not repeat that question because it's a very scary question. But he asked me one question, and I gave him the answer yes. And then, after it was all done, I said, okay, now I've said what I've going to say. Let's have a conversation. And I said, we're going to be leaving after 21 years, and when we leave, you're going to leave us alone,
So
and
you're
we're going
looking
to
for
leave
a
with
dish
great
that is
dignity and great
heartwarming for
honor.
your soul and your stomach. It got my...
We are going to take care of this situation. We're going to take our time. We had a date of May 1st, but they missed a couple of conditions. We had some very strong conditions, but they missed a couple of conditions. I wanted to be up by May 1st. I had spoken to them quite a bit before May 1st, but we had a condition of May 1st. But they missed conditions, and so therefore I bombed, and we hit them very hard. And then they said, we will agree to those conditions. I said, no, you've already agreed to them. Don't play games. We had them so good. They weren't in Kabul. You take a look at when they started taking over Afghanistan. It's when I left. When I left, that's when they started going wild, because they were dealing with another president. And I never realized, and of course I realized the importance and power of the presidency, but I never realized how important the office of the president is until this happened. Because when I watched what happened over the last week and a half, with some horrible, stupid decisions that were made. Number one being allowing our military to leave before the civilians and before we get all of our equipment back. $83 billion. Nobody can even comprehend that much equipment. Thousands of vehicles. Thousands. You saw the list of vehicles. He could have the greatest car sale and truck sale in the history of the world. And these are all armor plated. These are millions and millions of dollars each for each vehicle. It costs millions of dollars. And that's where we were. And we were getting ready to leave, and then the election was rigged. And shockingly, I lost. Even though I got 12 million more votes than I got the first time, even though I ran a better campaign than I ran the first time, the election was lost. The ballots were rigged. They used COVID in order to cheat, because they cheat fantastically. If they could fight wars like they cheat an election, we would have had that war won in one day.
Mr. President, I want to stay on what happened in March of this year. In March of this year, the Taliban attacked forward operating base Chapman, according to publicly available reports, which is a highly sophisticated and secure American installation, injured 7 Americans. Would you have considered the Doha Agreement breached at that moment?
Oh, we would have hit them so hard it would have been breached, and they would have come back and they would have said, please, please, please. We had a couple of conditions breached, much less than what you just mentioned. That was a big hit. When I saw that and heard about that, I said, well, that's strange. It was strange because they would have never done that if it was me.
Now, you brought home...
Having taken out Soleimani was the biggest of the world. I was with the head of Pakistan, who's a great guy, Khan, and we met. It is a very respected figure and a very great athlete. Actually, he is like the Mickey Mantle of cricket. I don't know if you know that.
Right.
A very respected, dignified, handsome man. And I was with him, and I got along with him very well. He said, when I heard that you took out Soleimani, I closed my offices and I went home for a week. It was the biggest thing to happen in the Middle East in 100 years. He said, you have no idea. When you took out Soleimani, that was the biggest thing to happen in the Middle East, Mr. President, in 100 years.
I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it.
They had fear of him. I think even, if you want to know the truth, I think Iran might have been happy too. They just don't say it. They feared
interesting. You brought home
him more than any other person or more than any other country.
And he was capable. You brought home 55 hostages.
Well, he was getting ready to hit us. Capable. He was getting ready to hit us very, very hard. And we had information, and I had information. And he was going to those meetings, and he wasn't going to them with school children, okay? The man in the van with him, who made the mistake of saying, hey, I'll pick you up at the plane, we'll drive. They drove through the Valley of Hell. They were looking to do very, very bad. That was going to be a very, very big hit. But I'll never forget, head of Pakistan, highly respected and very elegant person, said this was a day that is the most important day. We couldn't believe it. It took him weeks to believe it. That's what he told me. Others have told me the same thing.
I agree. Now, I want to go back to the hostages, though,
and by the way, al-Baghdadi, the founder of ISIS, who was reconstituting ISIS, he's the man with the flag, with the fan behind him so much, where you see for years. And I'd say to my people, you gotta get the guy with the fan. It's very easy. He used to make speeches. You remember this? Show the
Yes.
same location with the fan right behind his head. I said, you gotta get. He was the founder of ISIS, and he was rebuilding ISIS after I defeated ISIS, and we got him. And
let's talk about the people you brought home, Mr.
You will.
Danny Birch from Yemen, Joe Wang from Iran, Pastor Brunson from Turkey. You brought home 55 hostages or wrongful detainees. How difficult will it be to get Americans out of Afghanistan? And right now, we don't know how many are going to be held hostage there, but I think it's going to be bad. How hard is it to get hostages out?
So let me just mention one thing, and Robert O'Brien was that's how he came to my attention. Robert did a really great job. He was my hostage negotiator. We made him an ambassador. He was ambassador of hostage negotiations. You ever hear of that one before?
Yes. Yeah.
And he was very good at it. And we were 58-0. And here's the other thing. I never paid money. We didn't pay money, because once you pay money, you're going to have to pay a lot of money. We didn't pay $1.8 billion like Obama did, where he sent that money to Iran. We paid $1.8 billion in cash and to get hostages. And he didn't.
So what is going to happen in Afghanistan? I think we're going to have hostages there, don't you?
Okay, so let me just tell you. We did great. We were 58-0, and we got everybody. Sadly, I was there too late. Because if I were president at the time, we got Otto out of North Korea, but unfortunately he was in such horrible shape. He died soon afterwards, but we got him out along with 4 other hostages out of North Korea. That's the toughest one of all, North Korea, the toughest one of all. But I had a relationship, a great one, I still do, with Kim Jong-un. Very smart gentleman, very, very smart. We're dealing with people that are at the top of their game, President Xi, Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un of North Korea. And we're dealing with people that are at the top of their game, including France and including Germany and including other countries. And we have a man that doesn't know what the hell is happening. Other than they're good at cheating at elections. That's all they do well.
But what are they going to do about these hostages? Do you think we're going to have hostages in Afghanistan?
Now let's get to that. So we could have thousands of hostages. I don't think they know what they're doing. Yesterday they said 500. So the 35,000 all of a sudden is 500. And yet most of the people taken on the plane, most of those people, as you know, are Afghans, right? So how are we down to 35 to 500? Nobody knows what the number of hostages is. I don't think the United States has a clue. I think there are thousands of people that are hostage. It's a much more difficult position than even like Brunson, Pastor Brunson. I knew the head of Turkey. I had a great relationship with him, as you know. Great relationship.
Yeah.
I got him out. I said, you got to do it. He said, no, we have laws. I said, no, you're the law. No, we have laws. And then eventually I got him out because he was the law, okay? It was very simple. But this is a more difficult situation. You have so many. You have a big element of religion. Anytime you enter religion, when it becomes a religious fervor, it sometimes tends to be more difficult. I found that because I've gotten a lot of people back. And you have new elements being added. Now you have ISIS-K, whatever ISIS-K is, because we wiped out ISIS, so now they have a new branch. It's called ISIS-K. They're very bad. They're very bad. And you have the Taliban. So I can't tell you. I have one concept that I would do that I think would be foolproof, but The hostages are in grave danger, and so are a lot of Afghans that came to our aid.
Would you have ever allowed our troops to leave, or the NATO troops to leave, or the air power contractors to be pulled out with civilians and allies and Afghan interpreters in the country still?
No, it's not conceivable. I don't know if you saw my speech. We had 68,000 people in Alabama on Saturday night. And I told the story that I was with a group and there was a 5-year-old, the son of somebody, a 5-year-old boy. And I talked to him about it quickly. And I said, so would you leave the soldiers or would you pull them out? He said, oh, I'd leave the soldiers. A 5-year-old child would leave the soldiers. Anybody would leave the soldiers. When I heard they were taking out the soldiers, and I guarantee you, when Abdul, and look, I spoke to him tough, but I had a very good relationship with him, very good. Nobody could negotiate with him like me. I had a very, very good relationship with him, and I found him to be reasonable. He did some minor violations, but he ultimately didn't violate it at all. Look, all of this takeover of all of Afghanistan, not just Kabul, all of the relationships, all of this that I had, everything, and with more than just him, it all took place, all of the taking over of Afghanistan, when you see the red on the page, it got bigger and bigger, that took place after I left. And
would you have closed Bagram, Would you have closed Bagram?
No, I would not have closed Bagram. So I was going to bomb. So in order, I would have gotten all Americans out. I would have gotten all of the people that helped us out that were in danger, if they were good people. Some were not good people. Sadly, and just to interject, we have some very, very bad terrorists coming out and getting into the planes, and they're smart and they're tough, and they can get into the planes much easier than a normal person, because there's no vetting. They're not vetting anybody. They have no idea. They have nothing to vet with. I would have taken the Americans out. I would have taken other deserving people out. That would have been number one. Number two, I would have, and I've already, I instructed them to do this. We were doing it. I was doing it in a very orderly fashion, and we weren't losing anything. And this was all over Afghanistan, not just in Kabul. So I would have taken the people out. I then would have taken all military equipment. And I said to them, I want every single nail, screw, and bolt. I then would have, with the exception of Bagram, which I would have kept, I would have bombed all of the bases, because I don't want to give those bases to Russia, China, or even the Taliban. I would have bombed every base. I would have evacuated them. I would have taken out every single, and I use this expression with our woke generals, I said, I want every single screw to be taken out. And I had Millie tell me, sir, it's cheaper to leave the equipment than to take it out. I said, you mean leave millions and millions of dollars of Army tank, and you say it's cheaper? I say, then you better go back to business school, because you're not a very good. Millie told me, sir, it's cheaper to leave it. And you know what? That's exactly what they did. It's not cheaper to leave it. It's the dumbest statement, one of the dumbest statements I've ever had. We have people, Leo, we have people that do that. They transport, just like I use the military to transport the vaccine so that people could get the vaccine. I used the military for taking stuff out, and we were starting. But military, I will say, Millie said to me on 2 occasions, sir, now it's a lot easier to leave it because you can just leave it. But I thought it was absolutely crazy. I also knew it was going to collapse because and I told you once a long time ago, Ghani was a thief. Ghani had great power in the United States Senate. He had senators and congressmen that were his friend. His whole life was the U.S. Senate, and that gave him power. But he was basically and inherently a thief who had no control over the country other than he was powerful within the United States Senate in particular, which is terrible, by the way.
Well, General McMaster and Secretary Esper are blaming you for the Doha agreement. They're saying that you empowered them. What do you make of these criticisms from General McMaster, who was your second national security advisor, and Secretary Esper?
Yeah, these are two guys, oftentimes you'll hire people and they'll turn out to be bad no matter how good you are. I had great people in my administration, and if I ever do it again, we'll have those people and a lot of even better ones. But I had great people in my administration, but those two were stiffs. McMaster was not a smart guy. All he liked doing was talking to the press, and I rarely listened to him, and then ultimately fired him. And Jesper, I called him Jesper because all he did was say yes. Jesper was like a little boy. All he did was say yes. No matter what you asked him, he was a lightweight, and honestly, should not have been in that position. We were rushed because there was a difficulty with a good man who was in there prior to him. He had some family difficulty, and I gave Jesper a try and put him in there for a short period of time. He didn't have what it takes. The men didn't respond. The men and women, the people within the military, did not respect him. And McMaster, all he did was like to write things and write books and complain, and he wasn't a smart person. Just so you understand, they're complaining about the agreement that I just talked about with you, which had strong conditions. And when the reason, as an example, I wanted to be out as soon as possible. We had to get out strong with all our equipment and no death. The reason nobody was killed in the last 18 months was because of what we did. Beyond the agreement was because of the relationship I developed with the leaders, and in particular with Abdul.
Over the weekend.
Lightweights. Let me just say, I put him in the same category, and I put Bolton there too. Bolton was one of the dumbest human beings I've ever dealt with, but he had a tough reputation, so he was good for me to bring him into a room. The other side nation would see him, and they'd say, oh my God, Trump is going to go to war with us, because Bolton was a nut job. And so that was Bolton. The other two guys were different, but they were weak.
Let me go back to President Biden. Over the weekend, I got that. Over the weekend, you called for President Biden to resign, but that would make Kamala Harris the president. Do you believe she would be doing a better job than Biden?
I think that she's terrible. I think that I was surprised when he picked her because she had done very poor in the debates, and she had done very poor in the polling. She was heading in the wrong direction, but he picked her. Look, everything this guy does is sort of strange. And I just looked at a recent poll where she's down even lower than him, which is pretty hard because he's down very low. I also looked at polls where I'm winning by many points, but I was when we had the election. I don't know. We have people in office that did not win the election. Okay, they didn't win the election, and the numbers have come out. 15 million ballots the other night. Think of it. 15 million ballots were found the other night that weren't used. They were found by a highly respected group. Highly respected group, a group that you have more respect than almost anybody for. 15 million ballots. 8 million ballots were ascribed to by a military person that does this professionally just a week ago.
Mr. President, it's much more important to talk about Afghanistan than these claims. I have not seen one claim that I agree with, but let's talk about Afghanistan.
You know why? Because the press doesn't write about it,
Okay, I have not seen one that I agree with, but
you could have certified numbers, which we will have, but you could have certified numbers and the press doesn't write about it.
But I want to go back to Afghanistan, especially. Now I want to talk about European allies. They're furious with President Biden.